course, I want to look tonight at one of the big stories in town after weeks, months actually, of Willie or weren't he? We know that the answer to that is now yes. I'm talking of Nigel Farage. He has announced that now he's the new leader of Reform UK, but there's more. He's also going to stand for election. Look. Let me cross live to Christopher Herp, our political editor. Good evening to you, Christopher. Anyone that's just tuned in and doesn't know what on earth's going on, bring them up to speed.
Well, Michelle, good evening. Great to be on your show again. Well, you join me here in central London, where we've seen some political news made here in big style here, with Nigel Farage saying he will stand to be an MP. He's going to fight the seat of Clacton, a seat held by Douglas Carswell for UKIP back at the 2015 general election. In fact, the only seat won by a UKIP MP when he was leader, of course, Nigel Farage back in the day. He announced that. He announced that Richard Tice is standing aside. He'll become chairman. Farage is now the leader, and the leader, he says, for 5 years. He says that the Reform UK party can be the biggest party in Parliament by 2029. He says the election is over, Michelle. He says it's happened, it's gone, been and gone. Labour has won a massive supermajority. He's talking there about the Sky News MRP poll. This is a poll of 60,000 people between the end of May and early June. They are finding that Labour have 422 MPs after the election, against the Tories 140, Lib Dems 48, and Reform a big fat 0. That's a majority of 194. That's more than the Blair majority that we saw back in 1997. So clearly, and that supports an MRP poll that GBNews was able to report on and announced on Friday night. That gave the Labour Party a much bigger majority. But even so, we are looking at a triple-digit majority for Labour, according to two big MRP polls taking place in the past about 5 days been announced. Elsewhere, earlier we heard from Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister. He's been up in Henley campaigning on the issue of a culture wars issue of what is a woman. He's making very clear that he believes that his party and his government will try and change the Equality Act to ensure that a woman is someone who is female at birth, and that remains with them, and that means that they can ban people from shared spaces in prison cells, in prisons, and elsewhere. So it's an issue of culture wars they're trying to fight there. And with the Labour Party, they've been in the north of England supporting defence. They've got a triple lock on defence. They're saying that the Labour government, if they win power, will maintain the nuclear weapons, will build 4 new nuclear submarines in Barrow, and will upgrade nuclear submarines when required. They're trying to distance themselves from the Jeremy Corbyn time, and of course that Labour leader couldn't even say he could fire a nuclear weapon in defence of our security in this country. And then finally, the Liberal Democrats, they've been also in Henley highlighting river pollution. And in fact, at one point today, Daisy Cooper, the deputy leader of the Lib Democrats, floated past on a boat waving as Rishi Sunak spoke with rowers and ate donuts. And of course the Lib Dems see that as a moment to kind of rain on the parade of the Prime Minister. They enjoyed that quite a lot.
Interesting. So look at that. Look at it. I mean, if you're listening on the radio and you can't see what is going on, you've just got a scene. I mean, it's almost like a bit of a comedy sketch now. You've just got people on, I mean, we talk about small boat crossings, don't we? And this is one that perhaps Rishi Sunak would be desperately keen to stop, because you've got a smiling bunch of people there, photo bombing with the Lib Dem signs behind them. But I tell you, Rishi Sunak's not stopped any small boats anytime soon, so he won't be stopping that one either. But for now, Christopher Herp, thank you very much for that update. I'm joined now by the Political Research Director at Savanta UK, Chris Hopkins. Good evening to you. We've just been hearing there about some of the potential impact of Nigel Farage returning to Reform UK. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this has the potential to be massive, Michelle, frankly. You know, I think that Nigel Farage is the closest that British politics really gets to celebrity, and that's irrespective of the fact that he went in the jungle. You know, he is a name brand. Yes, he is a bit divisive, but frankly, the types of voters that Nigel Farage and Reform UK are going after aren't the sort that already dislike him. They are those that are kind of on the fence or maybe wavering from the Conservative Party. We've seen in the last year and a half under Rishi Sunak's premiership that a lot of voters from the Conservatives in 2019 have gone to Reform UK, and there is real potential now that Nigel Farage is sort of back on the scene, and yeah, it's going to be very prominent in this general election campaign. That bleeding from the Conservative Party to Reform UK has not necessarily stopped.
And tell me about this whole notion of none of the above, the amount of people that are just, quite frankly, either going to spoil a ballot or not even bother to vote at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably slightly overplayed. I think there is a lot of apathy in UK politics in general, but I don't think that necessarily is going to translate into lower or hugely lower turnout at this election. I think we're going to get, a reasonable sized turnout similar to previous, and yeah, I don't really think it's going to have a huge impact. But those Reform voters that were maybe not going to vote, I think Nigel Farage returning is a way more chance of turning out than they've ever had before.
Interesting stuff. Thank you very much, Chris Hopkins. He is a political research director at Savanta, UK. I'll bring my panel in a second about Nigel Farage returning. I can tell you guys have been in touch with me. Andy says Farage seems to think he's some kind of right-wing messiah, but he's not. He's just a very haughty boy. The ego has landed in Clacton. He says, and yes, I did mean to write haughty and not naughty, as in arrogantly superior and disdainful. Ouch, get off that fence. Connor says Farage was a banker, man of the people, indeed. Susan, though, says, brilliant news. Go, Nigel. You've made many people very happy. Lee says, I would sooner vote for Farage than voting for any of the other two main parties. What do you make to it, Mark?
Well, at last, something interesting happens in the general election campaign, so let's be grateful for that, I think. It's not been the most exciting first week or two. I wonder if much has changed. Prior to this announcement today, Nigel Farage was all over the airwaves campaigning for Reform UK. He was on Question Time last week on the BBC as the Reform spokesman. He's now got a slightly different title. He'll be called Leader rather than Honorary President, and he is contesting a seat. And I guess in that seat, that improves Reform UK's chances. But I don't think this changes an enormous amount overall. Farage seems to think that somehow his re-emergence as the official leader means suddenly Reform will take light, it will catch fire, zoom past the Conservatives. But Chris Hope earlier was referencing that poll from your rival broadcaster at Sky. OK, that was before the announcement, but still predicts Reform will win 0 seats. Maybe they'll win 1. Maybe a couple. I reckon if you offered Farage 3 or 4 now, he'd rip your arm off for it.
Oh, well, you are downplaying the Farage effect on Reform UK. What do you make to it at home? Luciana, what do you think?
Well, the outcome of this election is going to go one of 2 ways. There's only 2 results that we're going to have. We're either going to have Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister, or if we look at every single poll that's come out today, and I'm not one in any way, shape or form to be complacent, but all the polls indicate today we're on course to see Keir Starmer under a changed Labour Party as the leader of this country. So in terms of what's happening with Nigel Farage today, it's very much in my mind a sideshow. And the fact that he's announced that he's the leader, that he's going to be in post for 5 years, that wouldn't be allowed in the other main political parties. It doesn't seem very democratic.
What wouldn't be allowed?
To say that you're going to be in post for 5 years. He's announced that he's going to be in post as leader for at least 5 years. Well, that's not how it works, certainly in the other main political parties. There's opportunities for members to have a vote and decide who they want as leader of the party. He's just announced himself not only as leader, but also as a candidate. There's 599 other seats that will be contested at this election. So, yes, this might be interesting in terms of what might happen at Clacton. But for the rest of the country, it's going to be a very different focus.
And Nigel Farage basically said he thinks that, I'm not doing a direct quote, but I was listening as he was saying it, that essentially there's not much of a contest and that Keir Starmer will be the next Prime Minister. Do you agree with that sentiment? That it's pretty much just a done deal?
Well, again, I don't take anything for granted, and I don't think any party...
Are you just being modest? Like, secretly, do you think, yeah, we've done it?
I sincerely hope that we see what this country desperately needs, which is change, and Keir Starmer as the Prime Minister of our country. But the election is still a number of weeks away. Politics is not a science, and anything can happen. But certainly, if you look at all the polls, it's only widening in terms of the expected outcome that Labour is very likely to win if we look at everything that's come out today.
I've got to just mention as well, because of course we are in an election period, so there are indeed other candidates that will be contesting that seat in Clacton. Brighton, and they are as follows. Jovan Oswald-Nepal from the Labour Party, Giles Watling from the Conservative Party, Matthew Bensalem from the Lib Dems, Nigel Farage from Reform UK, and Natasha Osborne from the Green Party. All candidates there have been contacted and invited onto GB News.